Hello. So today, I just wanted to talk a little bit. I know I talk a lot, especially when I make videos about trauma and things I've been through, and sometimes it makes me feel like I just end up trauma dumping on everybody. But this is what I want to talk about today is something that I really haven't shared much with people since it happened. I haven't really gone in depth or even mentioned it because it's something that took me a long time to process, really. And I wanted to share it because, especially, I think it's come up more on my mind as well because of seeing, evangelicalism encroach into our politics and people trying to legislate Christianity, essentially, has kind of brought a lot of this back for me, and has, I don't know, I just felt, I don't even know if I'll post this, but I felt like I needed to do this, or I wanted to do this. I finally was ready to share this experience. I will be talking about issues around like emotional abuse and coercion and victim blaming and things like that. So just so you're warned about the content. It's so view at your own discretion. But I'm also going to be putting on my makeup while I do this because I need something to distract me. And it sounds weird, but by distracting myself, I'll keep myself more on task and on focus, because otherwise I get lost in my head because my brain still struggles with this. So yeah, without any further ado, let's get going. So I guess to start this all out, actually give me one sec. Sorry, I just had to plug in my phone just in case battery goes. But yeah, so to kind of like lay the foundation of everything that we're talking about today, obviously, like basically everybody who knows me knows, I was brought up in super conservative religious circles, which meant by the time I was in my 20s, 23, 24, early 20s, I had never had a relationship. I had never even had, I had nothing close to a relationship. I had been taught, things like courtship and other such things. The idea of kind of like behind I Kiss Dating Goodbye, with this whole like dating should be something that you take seriously and you should only do it if you're ready for like a serious relationship and if there's like a really high probability that it's going to lead to marriage, essentially. And sorry, one sec. So I definitely took that to heart. Like, I was in the middle of purity culture and I took it seriously, I don't agree with it now, but it's where I was. I was extremely naive because I had grown up extremely sheltered, and I'd always been around people that had the same views as me and interpreted, the Bible, and everything around me was very homogenous. And so I just assumed that everybody that had the same faith as me was coming from the same perspective as me. I've heard a lot of stories of people being like sneaky and trying to get away with shit like when they were in those environments, and I'm like, that was literally never me at all. So anyway, that kind of sets the stage of early 20s, definitely in a place where I felt like I knew everything, which I didn't, and I was extremely ill prepared for the world, to say the least. And as well as having grown up in the family that I did, being blamed for so many things, essentially it really taught me some pretty toxic views on relationships. This idea that, falling on your sword and just taking blame when somebody blames you for something is, path of least resistance is always the best. And so I was used to taking blame for things, and I was used to just sort of capitulating basically to anything that people said. And so that just to like paint a picture of the version of me that was going into all of this, because back in 2013, which 9 years ago now, I got involved with somebody from my church. Now, I'm just going to warn anybody who's watching this who knows my church or knows anybody from what I'm about to say. I am going to be saying names because I have been shamed into silence for way too long over the years, and I need to take that back. So I'm not trying to dox anybody or anything. It's just important to me that I am able to have that freedom. So yeah, like I said, it's just fair warning for anybody who knows what I'm talking about. So yeah, summer 2013, I got involved with this guy from the church that I was going to. I was going to Calvary Chapel of Salem at the time. And let's see. Yeah. And I had known him for a while. We were actually, so he ran this soccer ministry, basically. For our church, it was the reason that he was actually there, because he was from Namibia. He was a former professional football player or something like that. And the church had him basically running this soccer ministry that was kind of, I think was just kind of his brainchild, really, and became his ministry, and he was like a missionary or something like that. And so obviously a lot of people knew him, and I knew of him even before I met him. But all that to say, I had been given this impression that he was a really good person, and that that he really cared about his faith. And that was, that's how I saw him, because that's how he presented himself, to be honest. He was 9 years older than me at the time. Well, I mean, he's always going to be 9 years older than me. But yeah, so he was in his 30s. I was in my 20s. And I found him really attractive. As I got to know him, we were involved in the soccer ministry together. We went to the same Bible study. So I had gotten to see what I felt like was a more up close version of him, and I liked what I saw. And so I just decided, with the encouragement of my sort of adopted mom, to ask him out on a date. And I did, and we went, and we had fun, and I wanted to have another date because I liked him, and he did not. And I respected that. I was sad because I liked him, but what are you gonna do? We did get pretty close as friends, and he and his friends started hanging out with me and my friends at my house, because it was, like I said, it was summertime, so I wasn't working. And during a lot of that time, we were doing soccer camp with Calvary Chapel, and so we were just close anyway. And then it was hot, and I had a pool, and I let people drink underage at my apartment, because I feel like the 21 rule is bullshit. Anyway. So we were hanging out quite a bit. And I don't know, it was fun. I enjoyed having a friends group and having people that I could hang out with. And, it's I liked him, but I also was okay just being friends with him, and I enjoyed it. There was a certain level of I guess a certain sense of safety, with having a person that's just a friend. because it I don't know, it's weird and it's hard to explain, but I definitely lulled me into this this sense of safety, because when people say they just want to be friends, I believe them. I take them at face value. It's who I am. But at the end of the summer, he and I had been texting through the evening. He was at a friend's house or something like that, and I was on my way to bed, actually, and he was asking me, oh, what are you up to? And I said, I'm going to bed. I'm just having a glass of wine, and then I'm going to go to bed. And I had like a lot of wine in my refrigerator at that point. And he was like, oh, that wine, that sounds good. And I was like, oh yeah, you should come, make sure you come before I drink it all. And what I meant by that, obviously to me, I'll admit that my ADHD makes me sort of only say half of what I mean out loud. But what I meant by that was at some point, right? And then I get a text back from him being like, okay, I'll be there in like an hour. And I'm like, okay. I mean, it wasn't an invitation, but okay. So he came over and we hung out and we drank like a bottle of wine. And we were just, hanging out. Like I said, he had said that he wanted to be friends. I believed him, and, I trusted him. So as we're just like hanging out, we're just like watching, stuff on his phone and just generally sort of just chilling, talking. He'd been out of town for a while, so we were just catching up. And then all of a sudden, like, he rests his head on my shoulder, and I'm like, here's the thing, I'd had quite a bit to drink, well, a lot more than I normally would, so I was a little bit slower, and, again, being the naive person that I am, just to explain, like, why I didn't immediately go, okay, I know what's going on, it was literally just a matter of, being naive and tipsy, and I was like, oh, can friends do that? Well, our friends can do that, right? And then, like, he puts his hand on my leg, and I'm like, I don't know. And before I knew what was happening, he grabbed me and kissed me, and it took me a good 5 seconds to catch up what was going on. And when I did, I was like, oh, whoa, what are we doing here? Just hold on. And he seemed like pretty taken aback when I kind of put the kiboshes on everything. And we sort of stopped, and I don't really remember the conversation that happened after that, but the end result of it was that we agreed to pray about it, because that's what you do. And I had mentioned actually that was my first kiss, which, excuse me, also seemed to throw him a little bit. But it was, because like again, in those scenarios, like, you always pray about it first, but the way he was talking about it, obviously it felt like, in between the fact that for me, physical contact equals you want to be in a relationship with somebody, plus the way that he was talking about it, really made me feel like he was very much like, I want this to be a relationship. We just need to pray about it first. But like, this is probably going to be a relationship. And that, he was on board with that. And so obviously that made me leave my guard down and, kind of open up even a little bit more. And so when a little bit after that, I don't know how long it was, but he invited me to come over and hang out with his friend to watch movies, I was like, yeah, sure. I trusted that everything was going to be okay, and we went over and we watched a couple movies. At some point his friend fell asleep, and after that happened, I was kind of starting to wonder, like, should I go home? And I was like, no, we can do this. Like, I can do this. I know that I don't really want to do anything, but we did end up doing stuff. And the thing is that, especially with As Far As I Let It Go, if for 2 seconds I had thought that there was a possibility that this was not going to turn into a relationship, I would have not in a million years done what I did that night. Because like I said, I took my purity and my chastity and all of that very seriously. And the reason that I let it go as far as I did, because I thought this is going to be a relationship. It's all going to be fine, right? Like it's going to redeem itself in the end, basically. You know, maybe we should, you know, dial it back a little bit when we're actually dating, but you know, it's okay because we're going to date and it's going to be fine and we're going to be in a serious relationship. And that's what you know, and so I just let my guard completely down and I went for whatever it was that we were going to do. And yeah, you know, and I walked away kind of feeling like pretty good about myself, you know, being like, oh, maybe I took it a little too far, but you know, whatever. And yeah, imagine, if you will, the bombshell then that got dropped a while after that. I don't remember how long again. What is time? When he's like, yeah, I don't think it's God's will for us to date. And I was like, wait, what? I was pretty devastated, understandably so. I had thought it was going to go one way. He had definitely made it sound like it was going to go one way. And like I said, that was the reason that I even let things go as far as I did. And so the first question in my mind was, why? Why, if you had doubts, did you ever initiate any kind of physical contact between us? And he really wouldn't give me a straight answer there. And I'd kind of like, I did bug him about it over the course of even a couple conversations while I was trying to like just figure this all out and figure out what's going, because, you know, my world turned upside down that day. Nothing that I believed and nothing that I had held to was right. You know, all the beliefs that I had about relationships and everything else got turned topsy-turvy that day. And I was just in a free fall figuring out what the hell happened. And he wouldn't give me a straight answer that could have put me on solid ground and given me closure and gotten me to move on. You know, if he'd just admitted what was really going on instead of just avoiding the question, I think I would have been able to just, okay, cool, you're a scuzzbag, but moving on. But he didn't. It was just, like I said, it just kept avoiding the question. And I was just kind of like, okay, I ended up more confused than I even started out as, which is not amazing, because I was already extremely confused about the situation. One sec, I'm gonna cut my crease and then I'll be right back. Okay, crease cut, let's keep going. So after all of this sort of went down and I was just a wreck, there became this like feeling from him and this sort of, the way he was treating me and just everything that he was saying, it very much felt like he thought I was being over dramatic and too emotional and too needy and, you know, everything that, I mean, to be fair, like I get emotionally unregulated because, again, ADHD, PTSD, not really a good combination, to be able to regulate your own emotions. And I didn't really know what I was going through, but, you know, I kind of had a right to be a little emotional. But like, again, he says this stuff and guess what? I internalize it because that's what I've always done. And so I believed that, you know, there was something wrong with the way that I was acting, as well as there became this feeling of like, well, you know, if you weren't so needy, then maybe this could have worked out, right? Which is a weird, like, I don't know. But it definitely made me think that, you know, if I can just not make him unhappy, then maybe we'll be able to be together, is essentially what I started to feel. And as time went on, like I kept trying and it just felt like nothing was working, and it just felt like he was just pulling away more and more as time went on. And so I'd get to this place where it was like, fine, you know, if that's where we're at, that's where we're at, fine, I'll move on, right? Because at the end of the day, what are you going to do? You don't have any control over somebody else. And the problem is that when I started to do that, when I actually started to pull away a little bit, then all of a sudden he was back in my life. He was being friendly, he was being nice, he was, making me feel like he did before. And I was like, oh, okay, so maybe you do like me, right? And it was very confusing, obviously, because I had no idea what was going on. Like, zero idea what was going on. And I would just ended up whiplashed really as time went on. And because this just became a pattern of he'd distance himself from me. I'd finally give up and distance myself from him. And then when I did that, he'd go after me, pull me back in. There'd be this moment in time, which was the moment in time that I basically lived for, and the reason that I kept going, where everything was perfect and we were happy and it just felt good and it felt right. And then all of a sudden, and it could be like literally the next day, I was too needy again, I was too emotional, and he was pulling away from me. And this, I don't know how many times over the months that ensued that happened, but it was enough, for me to basically get to this point where I just I don't even know which way is up anymore. Like, I don't know what's up, I don't know what's down, my mood and my feelings and everything that everything that was going on was completely controlled by him and his mood and whatever, he was feeling like that day. And which is obviously not at all healthy, but it was the model that I knew and it was familiar to me. Like, let's just be honest, it was familiar to me because of how I'd grown up. And so I just kept going with it because I thought eventually, stuff will happen and it'll be okay. But of course it wasn't, and it didn't get okay. And I just got incredibly depressed. My mental health is just absolutely down the drain. I mean, it was like, what mental health, because like I said, I didn't know which way was up and which way was down at that point. And all I wanted was to be loved and to feel loved, and he just wouldn't give me that, not consistently anyway. And when he was distancing himself from me, he could be a real asshole too. One such time actually was we were all hanging out, playing pool. We were hanging out with some people we didn't normally hang out with, but that his friends knew from community college. And like I said, as we were, just kind of chilling before we all started playing pool, one of the people's asking him about school, and he had just started going to Corbin University at that point. And he was asking him, oh, how's it going, and blah, blah, blah. And Lakias was like, oh, it's good, and then looks over at me and is like, there's lots of girls there. And I was like, excuse me. I was furious because it's like, I know that you're trying to get under my skin. I know you're trying to bug me, because when you get under my skin like that and make me feel inferior, then I get desperate and try to, please you, essentially, which is not at all any kind of healthy model for anything, but it was what it was. And like I said, it just pissed me off really, because I knew that that's what he was doing at that point, and I was just over it. And I grabbed my best friend and I go to the bathrooms and I was like, can you believe this? She hadn't actually heard what he had said, but I was like, can you actually believe this? And I was like, I'm just like, what am I supposed to do? Right? I don't want this to get under my skin. I don't want to show him that this is affecting me. And so I was like, you know what? We can do that. Two can play at this game. And so I walk out, and I just started flirting with one of the guys that was hanging out with us that didn't normally hang out with us, very openly in front of him. And he caught on pretty much immediately and decided to make it like his goal for the night to beat this guy in pool. Like, it laser focused to the point of like, it wasn't just like, oh, they're about the same and he's getting competitive. It was like he had something to prove, and it felt weird. It felt very weird. And a lot of us were just kind of like, like, this is ridiculous. I mean, I was a little bit pleased with myself because I knew that I'd gotten under his skin. And by the time he eventually beat this guy, all of us were just over his whole macho thing, and everybody was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, dude, and kind of walk away from the whole situation. I think he thought that, oh, if I win, then, you know, I'm going to get all this attention, and that I was going to suddenly be like, oh, my hero, something, I don't know. And, which obviously I was never going to do. And when he didn't get the response that he wanted, then like everything just like he almost gets like manic. It was so weird. Started like harassing my friends. Like he owed one of my friends like $5 or something like that, and he kept like being like, no, you know, here's the money, like I'm gonna pay you back. And she was like, no, don't worry about it. And then it just like he became insistent, and not like in a nice like I need to pay you back way, but like in a weird, I don't know, it was just the only thing I can describe it was just completely bizarro world. The way he tried to put it in her pants pocket, he was just like, I mean, it became this thing. She was so uncomfortable, which like, that's understandable. And everybody else was uncomfortable, and it pissed me off a little bit, but more so just kind of made my heart sink down through my stomach, because I knew from that interaction that no matter what kind of power I tried to take back, and no matter how much I tried to play the same games, he was always going to win. He was always going to find a way to get back at me. He was always going to find a way to get me, because I cared about my friends. I always had something that he could go for. You know, there was always something that he could get at me for. And it just made me feel all that more not, you know, powerless. Not to mention the fact that it was like, there was a couple incidents, at least one, where somebody that I had confided in, I think it was Lena, had kind of been like, I know what you did to him. And oh my God. So I get this like angry text, and him just being absolutely pissed, like that I told anybody, because that we, you know, I wasn't supposed to tell anybody, which I'm like, bullshit. Like I'm gonna tell people. I'm not gonna tell everybody, but I'm gonna tell people that I trust and need. And yeah, I was like, okay, cool. So if people call you out, I get the butt end of it. If I try to stand up to you, you play dirty. There's no getting out of it. I'm trying to get away. You pull me back in. It was hell. It was literal hell. And it wasn't even like, it's like I liked him and I was attracted to him, but then also like I didn't, and I was kind of resentful of him. And, you know, there was even a point where my best friend was like gonna give him a piece of her mind. And I was like, don't, he's just gonna get mad at me. Like, don't, because I learned at a young age that when people start doing stuff like that, it's path of least resistance. Don't stand up to them, just keep going. I had no tools in my toolbox to actually help myself out in this situation. So that being that, I kind of fell into this weird pattern of like both loving him and resenting him at the same time, you know, like being really unhappy with him, but also like needing him at the same time, because like I said, I was living for those moments of like perfection. And it was just, it was weird, y'all. It was like the Twilight Zone. And then there became this incident where apparently he had wrecked his car. And I got a call from him asking me to pick him up from soccer practice. So I did, and it turns out, yeah, he'd done something stupid and wrecked his car. And our assistant pastor, Michael, was pissed at him about it, understandably, because the church gave him that car. And so I'm driving him home. He's bitching and complaining about how upset Michael is at him, which I was on Michael's side on this one. I'm like, I mean, I wasn't going to say anything to him about it, but I was just sort of like, yeah, I kind of understand, like, and apparently Michael was going to start driving him to all of his events, and I was just like, you know what, Michael lives in Silverton, I live literally close to everything that Lycius needs to go to. So how about I just take him, right? I'll just drive Miss Daisy and don't worry about it. Mainly just, it was more for Michael than anything else. Because there was that part of me that just like really resented Lycius for everything that he had been doing. And, but then as, you know, so I had to drive him around for about 2 weeks, and as time was going on, you know, things got good again, and he was nice to me, and he was, you know, it was like having my friend back, because like I said, you know, I lost a friend with all of this because he was my friend, you know, and so I felt like we had this friendship back, and the chemistry that we'd had before, it just, everything felt good. And I thought, wow, okay, finally, you know, we're making progress, because before it was like, you know, here and there was no consistency. And I thought that it was just, you know, we were just trying to move forward instead of going in circles. And so I was feeling like really encouraged by that, and feeling like, oh, you know, this actually might go somewhere finally, and we might actually be able to move beyond this push and pull bullshit. And but the minute I stopped having to drive him and he stopped needing me, he goes back to the whole I'm needy, I'm clingy, because I was like being friendly to him because we had spent the last 2 weeks, you know, in each other's company quite a bit. And yeah, so he starts like, we go back to the push-pull thing, and I was so confused. I didn't know what to think, because I'm like, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything wrong here. Like, what, why? And I just started to feel like really jerked around. And finally, again, after talking to Lena, because she was basically like my adopted mom, she kind of encouraged me to give him an ultimatum. So I did. And I sat him down and I was like, listen, I don't know what's going on here, but shit or get off the pot, essentially. And he was like, yeah, no, I just think of you as a friend. And I was like, okay. Then why, I know I keep going back to this, but why did you initiate a physical relationship with me if you did not have the intention of actually having a relationship with me? And there was like, it was one excuse after another. Things like, oh, well, you invited me out in the first place. You asked me out on the date in the first place. And then it was, oh, well, you know, you invited me over that night, which I laughed in his face about that one, because I knew that wasn't true. It's like, no, bro, you invited yourself over. You created the situation, mate. And then finally, when none of that was working on me, he just sort of shrugs and goes, I was tempted. I was absolutely like, you know, I have like that light bulb moment of like, he's never going to take responsibility for this. I know why he was doing it now, the more I talk to him, because it was just because he was lonely and horny, and then like to have the control, I'm assuming enjoyed the control that he had over me afterwards. Because otherwise, why would you do this? You know, he can't claim like he didn't know that I didn't know what was going on, because like he knew that I was naive. He knew that I didn't, you know, that I didn't understand these things. I think it was obvious that I didn't. And he could have done the kind thing and just, you know, told me the truth, and he wouldn't. He wouldn't take responsibility. He wouldn't own up to anything, and he wouldn't be forthright with me. And so I was just like, yeah, no, we're done here. You know, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep like waiting around and hoping that maybe one day you'll realize that you actually want to be with me. And we stopped being friends after that day, for obvious reasons, I feel like. And yeah, things kind of started to get better for me really for a while. Like it was worse, but also better at the same time. I started going to a different church service from him. You know, I only saw him when I had to, like at soccer team meetings and stuff like that. And then I could just be like, I had friends there, so it was like I could just be cordial. Anytime I saw him, it's just like bare minimum, you know, just so we don't make other people uncomfortable, basically. But it was all, yeah. And yeah, things got better for me. Well, mostly because here's the thing, is once I got out of it, I began to realize, like, this was an abusive relationship. And I started saying that to, like, Lena, and then Michael's wife was mentoring me at the time. So I was saying it to her, kind of like, can we please do something about this? Because this is not okay, him being abusive to me. And they were basically like, no, you don't want to do that because it would, like, put everything in jeopardy for him. Like, because if the church knew what was going on, then they might have to pull support for him. And if we do that, then he might have to go back to Namibia. As well as, if we did that, then, people would have to find out, excuse me, about what you did. And you don't want that, do you? And of course I didn't want people thinking that I was a hoe, which is what the implication, because I kissed him back. I was just as culpable for what had happened. And there kind of also became, like, this weird narrative of, like, well, I mean, you did go away from, like, God's perfect plan for sex because of the fact that you did some very sexual things outside of the confines of marriage. You got the cart before the horse, essentially. And so the fact that you were in an abusive relationship is also kind of on you, because you should have, basically, I should have seen it coming. I should have been able to, like, somehow not put myself in that situation, which I didn't even put myself in that situation. He put himself in that situation. Like, I don't, it was a lot of victim blaming stuff, trying to sort of, it was, I mean, I know that people do this a lot with, like, powerful men, especially in the church, but, like, it really stings to be on the receiving end of that. I don't know if people understand that, have never been on that end of things, but, like, do you know how, like, isolated that makes you feel? Like, I felt so fucking isolated. I felt like nobody was going to listen to me, and it just, yeah, I was drowning and nobody was helping me get out. They were basically like, well, you got yourself into this, you can get yourself out of it, and also you can't ask for help. And it's like they're empathetic, but, like, also we're not going to really do much to help you. And yeah, I felt lonely and isolated and confused, and I just, yeah. And in the middle of all of that, January 2014, I get a text from Lycius being like, hey, are you okay? Like, you just seemed kind of off at Bible study tonight, because we're coming home from Bible study. And I was like, I was a little bit pissed, because it was like, I told you I didn't really want anything to do with you. Like, it just annoyed me more than anything else, because I was trying to move on with my life. And I didn't really want to get into it, but I just kind of blew him off a little bit and was like, yeah, no, I'm fine. And I had to go to work the next day. I just couldn't deal with it. But I didn't really think much of it, to be honest with you. I just kind of was like, that was weird. He's never paid attention to my feelings before. Sorry, one sec. And yeah, time went on. Another thing that started to happen was, like, first of all, I was living a very angry life. I was really upset and angry, and I think it was pretty understandable, but they kept telling me, like, you're angry, you're too angry, you shouldn't be this angry because you're going to get bitter. And also, you need to forgive your brother for what he did to you, because, this forgiveness, this toxic forgiveness thing that Christians have of, like, you need to forgive people even if they haven't asked for an apology. And it's not like it's a good idea for you to do. It's, you have to, otherwise you're in sin. Because, the Bible teaches us to forgive no matter what. And so I started, I started hearing, like, basically that I was now in sin, and that I was wronging him because I was holding this against him, and I was being unfair and all of this. And I started to feel like, yeah, I did have some responsibility. And so I wrote him a letter, and I was like, basically saying, I'm really sorry for the way I've been treating you, and I forgive you for everything, which, like, he didn't ask, and now he's being absolved. I mean, it's insane, right? Like, I was victimized by him, and now I'm absolving him from what he did to me. Like, in what world does that make any sense? In my world, it made sense, because I was living in, like, opposite world, apparently. But yeah, And of course, after I did that, then he was like super friendly with me and called me and was like, oh, I just really appreciate that. And so then we were back to being friends. And because of this whole thing, I didn't know that I had to be back on my guard again, which sounds stupid, but it was what it was, because of the fact that I was being told I didn't get to have any boundaries whatsoever, essentially, and that I had to forgive him, and I had to just let him, let him back into my life, essentially, and everything was going to work out. And of course, that didn't happen. I mean, I feel like everybody can figure that out from context clues here. So yeah, we went back to being friends. He and I started, casually texting back and forth a bit. And spring break, so it was like March 2014. He reached out to me and was like, hey, I'm house sitting for these people. So I have the house to myself. Do we want to come over and hang out, watch movies, whatever. I know it sounds so naive for me to say that I trusted him in that moment, that nothing was going to happen because we were friends, but I did. And so I went and we hung out. We had a little bit to drink, and then he initiated physical contact again. And this has been the one incident that has like eaten at me for a long time, because the other stuff I was like, yeah, no, I didn't consent to that. That was under false pretenses. I was manipulated. But this time I'd always said, no, I consented to that. Like, I wanted that. But the more I've been able to process it, the more I realized, like, he spent so long establishing the fact that I couldn't go against him, that I had to do whatever he wanted, or else he would be unhappy with me, and there would be consequences for me. There would be, massive consequences for me. And, he, like I said, he spent all this time establishing that already. And as well as just with everything that had happened, it just wore me down. Like, I didn't actually want to do anything. I remember just feeling like, fine, whatever you do, like, fine. And that was kind of the attitude I went into it with. So it wasn't exactly like enthusiastic consent or something. And, yeah, I mean, I was under no, like I knew that what was about to happen did not mean that we were going to get into a relationship. Like, I knew that. But I also didn't feel like I could tell him no. And, I just went along with it because, at the end of the day as well, like, when we would do that, I would actually feel like it was messed up, but I felt loved and I felt seen. And so I went along with it, like I said, I didn't want to. It wasn't that I didn't enjoy myself, but I just didn't want to, because of the fact that, like, my convictions were what they were. But like, what was I going to do? Right? Like, tell him no? I had already learned that I couldn't do that. So, all that to say, we did stuff, we messed around. And the next day, even before, honestly, even by the time I got home, I was really upset that I had done that and that had happened. And, I was kind of in this place of like, okay, you know what? We're not doing this anymore. This is not happening anymore. I'm tired of always coming back to the same place of just going along with whatever it was that he wanted to do, and I'm losing out, but I have no other choice than to do it. And so I went over to his place like the next day. I was like, we need to talk about this. And I went over and I just told him, like, this is not going to happen again, ever. We're never, ever getting back together. And like, looking back on it, he didn't exactly agree to it, but he also didn't put up much of a fight, And so I walked away feeling pretty good about myself. I'm like, finally, I stood up for myself. I put my foot down, and I'm never going to have to be in this position again, because I don't want to do this again. And I've made it clear to him that I don't. And I wish that was the end of the story. It's not. A couple months later, it was May 2014, I was at a women's retreat. And the thing is, we had basically no contact. I think zero contact other than seeing each other in things that we had to see each other at. But May of 2014, I was at a women's retreat, And I get a text from him as I'm like talking to somebody about shit that was going down with me, and being like, hey, what's up? What are you doing? What are you up to? And that's kind of when it clicked. Like, that, hey, what's up, out of the blue is, I'm lonely and horny and I want you to come over and make me not feel lonely and horny, you know? And so that, like, when I read that text, I was just like, oh my God, he thinks he can still, like, I said, no, I said, I don't want to do this. And he's still coming up like he can just be like, yeah, okay, let's do this again, after I'd made it really clear I did not want this. Because I didn't want to be in this position where I was the one that was saying no, but he had all the power. And I mean, like I said, thankfully I was at the women's retreat, so I was able to sort of have that like support system. But yeah, it sucked. It sucked really bad, because it was like, after all of that, after me feeling so proud of myself for standing up to him, it's as if it never happened now, because yeah, he just thinks he can still walk back into my life and get laid, or at least, you know, get something. And yeah, like I said, I was able to not have to deal with it because of the fact that I was at the women's retreat. And so I don't remember what I said, but I moved on. I was unhappy with him, but I moved on. And then July of 2014, so we're getting towards the end here. July of 2014, he sort of tricked me into coming over. Like he was like, it was basically like, oh, there's going to be a party, and there's like, because it was just after soccer camp had ended, so I thought it was going to be like a bunch of people hanging out because of, you know, soccer camp and whatever. And then I get there and it's a bunch of people I don't know, mostly some people that I do, and kind of cornered me into this essentially. And man, it was so weird. And like I said, I thought, well, you know, everybody's here, it's going to be fine. And then at some point, everybody just sort of mysteriously filed away. And the one person who didn't was the guy who always falls asleep. And he fell asleep. And Lycius tried to initiate something with me. And I was like, I mean, I was already thinking like, I really should go, because this is not going to be a good situation. And I knew it. And then, yeah, he tries it on with me again. And I was like, the minute he tries to do that, I was just like, okay, fuck this shit. And I walk out, I grab my shit, I walk out, I get halfway down the fucking driveway, and he's running after me, trying to convince me, trying to persuade me to come back inside and like do shit. And I was just like, it was so hard, because I've been so conditioned not to tell him no, but I didn't want it. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want anything to do with him in that regard. Like, we can be friends, I guess, but like, no, I don't want to do things with you. And thankfully I was able to get away. I think it helped that I was outside, so it wasn't like he could, you know, really do anything about it. But yeah, I was able to get away and go home. And I was so perturbed over that, just so perturbed. Because it just, yeah, again, I had already said no a million times, and he's still asking. He still thinks that he has a motherfucking chance. And thankfully I moved to Houston shortly after that, so I didn't have to really deal with that so much. And about 6 months later, because this is not the end of the story, 6 months later, I get a text from him being like, hey, can I call you? And I was like, hell no. But before I could even tell him no, he's calling me, because of course. And he's saying like, you know, he's like, oh, hey, how's it going? So who did you tell about us? And I was like, excuse me? What? I was dead curious. I'm not gonna lie. I was dead curious to know like why he wanted to know, but I also knew that engaging with him was a bad idea, and asking him why would just make things all that worse. So I just was like, no, I'm not telling you that information. I'm not telling you. End of story. And hang on, blue or like pinky purple. I have a lot of purple on my face right now. Like, yeah, I think dark blue. What the hell? But yeah, no, so and when I say that to him, immediately he goes into, why are you making my life so difficult and shit like that? Hang on. It's okay. Sorry guys, getting on sick. Lipstick emergency. Anyway, so yeah, he gets super upset with me and is just like, yeah, why do you have to make my life so difficult? Why do you have to make everything so hard for me? And when I didn't respond positively to that, because like, why would I? He then is like, oh, just kidding. I love you. You know, you're my friend, right? And, oh, you're fucking kidding me with this right now. So I didn't respond well to that one either. And so then he tries to engage me in conversation. Hey, what are you up to? What's going on? And so we had like a tiny conversation. And then he asks me again, who did you tell? And I was just like, I told him, I was like, it was honestly probably about 5 people tops, but like, obviously I'm not in control of who they told, but I'm still not gonna fucking tell you. You know, and once it became clear, like I wasn't gonna capitulate to him and what he wanted, then he hung up and end of conversation. And yeah, that did not leave me feel good at all. I felt violated, to be honest with you, because I had moved halfway across the country partially to get away from him and to get away from the situation, so I didn't have to get stuck in the same cycle over and over and over again that was killing me. It was literally killing me. And here he is still thinking that he can like get to me. Girl, just so over it. Hang on. So yeah, thankfully I think that was pretty much it with any kind of serious interaction that we had. I know I saw him at least one more time, but like I pretty much just stonewalled him out. He tried to talk to me and I'm just like, like there's this, I think it's called like gray rock or something like that, when you just like become extremely uninteresting, and I just did that, and he walked away. I'm like, thank God. I'm not here to see you, dude. Hang on. Okay, there we go. Much better. Yeah, so that was pretty much it. And, you know, I know that it seems sort of like anticlimactic. You know, there wasn't any kind of big something or other that really happened. You know, nothing horrible happened to me necessarily. And I think I kept telling myself that what he had done was really not that bad in the scheme of things, because I knew people who had had it far worse than me. But like, I still shouldn't have had to put up with that. It was not okay. And the fact that there were people in the church that thought that it was okay to just cover up for him and turn a blind eye, you know, purposefully turn a blind eye to everything that was happening. It's like, what he did to me was bad enough and harmful enough, but having people around him and people that I trusted and people that I looked up to telling me to feel ashamed for what I had done and blaming me for what was going on and telling me that I couldn't have a problem with it because A, it would be bad for him, and B, I would turn out to be a slut. you know, essentially that's how people would see me, as a slut, you know. And so it's almost like emotional blackmail in a certain way, like just, yeah, blackmailing me into silence, essentially. And I wasn't okay with that, and I think that's really messed up. Like, to be perfectly frank, it's really messed up to do something like that to somebody, to be like, yeah, no, you don't get to have, like, you don't get to have a problem with it, you have to apologize to him, and also you're not going to get to stand up for yourself at all. Like, it's just, you know, and I get it. They had a lot at stake, you know, with him. They had invested a massive amount. They were doing so much for him, the church was. And like I said, I get it, but like making me be collateral so that they're like, you don't look bad is just utter, like, what is that, you know? And it's like people were empathetic. Everybody who knew was empathetic, but like nobody actually like did anything about it, you know? And everything, you know, because they wouldn't do anything about it, and because there was this victim blaming going on and convincing me that somehow this was my fault and that I owed him an apology, all it did was just make me more vulnerable to him, because now I'm in this position of feeling like everything is my fault and just internalizing everything. And so then he could just get off scot-free as if nothing had ever happened ever. And yeah, it's hard for me to think about, to be honest with you, because I just think of everything that I've been through, and like, it hasn't been great. And the culture that surrounds everything that made this situation, you know, this patriarchal, messed up bullshit, it's like, I don't know, I just don't understand it, I guess, when I look at it from this side of things, because I was a victim, and I had been victimized by somebody, and the person that victimized me was allowed to just do whatever he wanted to, and nobody would hold him accountable for it. Nobody would say anything. He could just have carte blanche to do whatever he wanted because he was a man and he was in a position of ministry. And so that was just too important to everybody to, you know, to mess with. And then the other part that starts to come along is that then now I become damaged goods, essentially. You know, in purity culture, it's like when you've done something with somebody, even if it wasn't sex, you automatically just sort of get like a scarlet letter. And it only applies, by the way, to people who were born female. It does not apply to men, because when men do that, it's like, oh, boys will be boys, or oh, like that whole idea of like, if he's done something really big and bad, it's because God has like great plans for him, and so clearly like Satan is trying to interfere, you know, it's stuff like that. Or like, you know, he's just too important, because I'm not important apparently. Because I kissed him back, I no longer deserved to automatically be guaranteed that I would feel loved. You know, that all those things that I'd been told that I should have once, you know, at a certain point, a family, husband, the whole 9 yards, it was no longer going to be like easy for me to get, because when that happens to you and you do become damaged goods, you end up becoming like last person picked at gym class. There's always going to be somebody that men want to go out with that are not you, that have not done what you've done and not experienced what you experienced. And the kicker is that I didn't even want any of that to happen. I didn't want any of it. Not any of it. And just because I wanted to have a relationship with him like in the beginning doesn't mean that I like get to have to then, you know, that like, I've opened myself up to something. Like, I didn't want it. It hurt so bad, and I was the one that was disadvantaged at the end of the day because of it. He still works at that church. He still has a very prominent position. I don't know exactly. I just know that he's still there. And I've had to go through, it's like, obviously all my mental health problems are not his fault. Some of them are other people's fault. But it's like what I've had to go through and try to get over and to move on from what he did has been a massive uphill battle. After him, I had a really hard time wanting to get close to people. Like, I'd get close and then I would freak out and I would run away. I wouldn't let people in. There was just like a certain barrier that people would hit, and that's as far as I would let them. I didn't feel like I could get close to people because I didn't trust anybody anymore, especially men. And even though I wanted to be close and I wanted to have a relationship with somebody, at the same time, I was also scared because of what had happened to me. And because it was being held against me by so many people that made me extra scared. And I feel really grateful. I can't say how grateful I feel, like, there aren't words. I don't have words for how grateful I am that Alex came into my life, because the first day that we went out, our first date, he wanted to put his arm around me, and he asked me if he could put his arm around me, and I was like, nobody has ever done that. Nobody ever in my life has ever asked to invade my personal space, ever. Like, let that sink in. I was almost 30 and nobody had ever asked to touch me before. They just done it. And it was part of the reason why I started to trust him rather early on and was more open with him than I was with most people, because up until then, that's literally all I'd experienced. And all I'd experienced too was just people that wanted to interact with me or wanted to do things with me for their own benefit. It was more about them than it was about me. And with him, it never felt like that. I know there's like research out there that says that like corrective experiences are very therapeutic and can definitely help on the road to recovery. And like, I'm here to say that 100%, yeah, that's true. I would not be as happy as I am. I would not be as fulfilled or able to accept myself for who I am if I hadn't met Alex, if I hadn't, and it's like, I know it feels weird that I would be in a relationship with somebody halfway across the world from me, because it just seems, it's so inconvenient. It is really, really fucking inconvenient. Not gonna lie, it's difficult. But it's like, from the moment I met him, something was different, and I just knew I wanted that in my life. And no matter what, I've never regretted that. And I'm really, really thankful that that's happened. But I also know that I got lucky. I got incredibly lucky in that situation. I know that a lot of people don't end up in the same position as me. I know I even, in the scheme of things, I got off easy, which really should make you stop and think, because it's like, what my experience was not the exception. It's the rule. If you look up anything to do with like sexual misconduct and churches, you're going to find so much, pastors preying on students, just church elders cheating on their wives and living this whole double life. And it's like, Lycius had the whole double life thing going on for sure. It's like people saw this like really positive, charismatic, godly side to him, but that's not the side that I got to know, because as time went on, the more time I spent with him, the more I realized that him being an asshole was like closer to default and closer to who he actually was than what I had initially experienced with him, because the way that he talked and what he said and everything, it was like the soccer ministry was not his passion. It was a vehicle for him to get what he wanted. Everything was about him being able to get what he wanted in life, and he had no problem using and manipulating people to do it, even our church. And, it's just the facts. He's he used them. Like, he was barely involved with the soccer program, really. Like, you wouldn't think that, but then, like, when you look closely, like, everybody else was doing everything for him. Like, yeah, it's everybody else was organizing everything and setting everything up and, like, doing the hard work, and he basically just showed up for most of it. Which, like I said, it's, you know, when I talk to him and when we talk about it, it was, yeah, he didn't care about the kids. He didn't care about the ministry. It was just a way for him to sort of get what he wanted in life. And, you know, when you see that side to somebody, it is hard to come back from that. When you see, you know, I felt like I got a peek behind the curtain in a certain way, because after that I have been more skeptical of religious leaders, because I learned that's, you know, that you have to be. Just because somebody's a pastor or a church leader doesn't mean that they're a good person. And the problem is that that's what we teach people, is that people who are church leaders and pastors are good people, and so you trust them, and then they do stuff that's not okay, and then we let them off because they're men and they're important somehow. But the people that they've victimized, the people that have done, you know, participated in what they were a part of, are victim blamed. They're slut shamed. They're labeled hoes. And the men who did these things just go on their merry way, you know? Sometimes they have to confess it to the church, and then whatever. And they always, you know, even if it was a non-consensual encounter, it's like, I committed adultery. I've heard that way more times than I would care to about non-consensual encounters with people like that. And the system that they have, that the church has, that evangelicals have, just enables all of this to happen, because men are the spiritual leaders. Men are like vessels of God, basically. They're like above women when it comes to stuff like that. And so they're just like, it's drilled into us to just inherently trust them and to let them get away with whatever, because them not getting in trouble is just super important. And, you know, the system's rigged. And especially with everything that's been happening with evangelicalism kind of encroaching into our politics, I think is, you know, like I said at the beginning of the video, has definitely, you know, because of my experiences and because of this experience, it's like, this is not going to be good. It hasn't worked for the church. This male-dominated model has not worked for the evangelical church, even if they shun everybody who says anything different and kick everybody else and silence them. It has hurt people and harmed a lot of people. This patriarchal system has been nothing but bad for people that are not men for centuries. For absolutely centuries. There's a reason why we had the women's rights movement. It's because treating women more like property and less like equals is bad, and it leads to bad things for people. I can't believe that I have to say that out loud, but I do. And I don't know, it does scare me a little bit. It does scare me to see what's happening, because I know that people like me and, you know, other disadvantaged people and other minorities are going to get, we're going to become collateral for evangelicals to be able to have their perfect state, or whatever it is that they're trying to get. You know, they'll be fine. We won't. The rest of us won't. The rest of us who, you know, can't be protected won't. We won't be okay. And we should never live in a society where we have a system of doing things that only advantages a portion of the population. Our culture should work, and our society should work for everybody. And we shouldn't live in a society where people like me, women, AFAB people, you know, AFAB being like people assigned female birth, we shouldn't have to live in fear that something's going to happen and then we're going to be on the hook for it, you know? That knowing that there's always a chance that we could be in danger, that we could be preyed upon, that we could be forced to do something that we don't want to, knowing that I could be forced to carry a child that I don't want when I don't want to, scares me. I mean, thankfully, I think I've taken care of that mostly, but you know, that it's a scary thought to realize that, you know, your body isn't your own. And that's genuinely part of how I felt back then. It was feeling like my body wasn't my own, because whatever he wanted to do with my body, he got to do. And somehow I still wasn't the victim. I was a hoe. I was damaged goods. I participated. And it's been a hard one to carry, to be honest with you. It hasn't been recently till I realized, like, I was manipulated and coerced into this. I was put in a position where I couldn't say no to him. And that didn't feel good. And, like, nobody deserves to have that right to say no taken away from them. Anyway. I could go on and on about this for fucking ages, but I won't. So yeah, that's my story. It's not horribly dramatic, but I hope that it hits home a little bit. I hope, listen, if you're in the position that I've been in before, like, you're not alone. Here you go. You're not alone, and it's okay. You're not to blame for this. You're a victim, soon to be a survivor, and you don't deserve to be treated this way. And to all the people out there that want to keep this kind of ideology going and think that it's okay to act like this, all you're doing is making sure that other people get hurt. What you're saying and what you're doing and how you're acting hurts other people. It's my biggest fear, to be honest with you, that I'm going to find out that after I left, he did it to somebody else. Because even if maybe I was the only one dumb enough to fall for his shit, but given half the chance, knowing what I know about him, he would 100% take the opportunity to try and do something like that again. And that terrifies me, to think that, like, I'm not the only one. And I like I said, I hope I'm the only one that was dumb enough to fall for his bullshit, but I don't know that. And if there is somebody else who got caught up with his bullshit, first of all, please reach out to me, because I know what you're going through and what you've been through. You don't have to, no pressure. But also, like, it really pisses me off, to be honest. If I were to find that out, it would piss me off to no end at Calvary Chapel, because they enabled the behavior and they enabled him to do that, to continue to do this to people. And just fingers crossed that I was the only stupid one in that situation. But yeah. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for putting up if you've made it to the end. I know I get long-winded. What are you gonna do? But yeah, I hope you guys are well. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're taking care of yourselves. And hopefully some of you I'll see at some point. Otherwise, bye.